Great. Thanks for joining us, Ikra. Okay, so we wanted to make sure that you knew who NDTI were. Some of you might know us, some of you might not. So it stands for the National Development Team for Inclusion. It's a not-for-profit organisation, and all our work is around enabling people at risk of exclusion for any reason, I may say. Obviously, there's a list there, but really to be involved and to make decisions about the life and that they lead. So we do a lot on enabling people's voice to be heard. We co-produce programmes and a lot of resources. And what we're going to do today is bring some examples to you of some of the things we've done. We've only got 40 minutes, so we're really conscious of time, and you'll get a set of these slides. And what Ruth has brilliantly done is done a lot of the work on the slides, but also made sure all the links are there so that afterwards you can use them to go back and have a look at some of the things we're referring to.
Yeah, so this also may explain some of the spelling errors in a couple of slides. I do have dyslexia, so apologies for that.
I think they're great because Ruth's been teaching us how to use Canva, you'll see. Just to mention the programme, so Time to Talk Next Steps is the one that we'll talk about quite a bit today, because it's been very much around co-production with young people with additional support needs, a national programme funded by the lottery. That funding has ended, but the work that we're doing with young trainers continues, and we'll talk about that a bit in the course of this workshop. The Preparation for Adulthood programme is something NDTI has been involved in delivering with local authorities across the country for many years now, and we have got some really fabulous tools and resources which, if you're new to us, you might want to look at. And I've put a link in the little bit at the bottom of this slide so that you can go and have a look at those, because we're not actually majoring on them today, but I just thought it might be useful for people who might be new to us. And then the internships work programme, which is all about doubling the amount of supported internships in England. And we are leading on that project for the Department of Education with our partners, DFN Project Search and the British Association of Supported Employment. And again, just useful tips really in terms of other links of work that we do that might be useful to you. So I'm now going to hand over to Ruth.
Hi, it's lovely to see everyone. Like I said earlier, I'm Ruth. And in the session, we're going to be talking about the importance of working with young people and including people right from the beginning in the design and production of not just projects, but also training, for example, like this one. We're talking about the service design and how important it is to include individuals in that, but also talking about their learning and experience gained from NDTI delivery of Time to Talk and Time to Talk Next Steps. And we'll be exploring co-production and young people's voices from a rights-based perspective.
Thanks, Ruth. And I forgot to say, folks, please do put questions in the chat, because although we haven't got long with you, your questions are really useful to us. So, you know, feel free to use the chat. I'm keeping my eye on it, and I know that Ruth will be as well.
So when we talk about co-production, it's often a word that I hear thrown around a lot. However, what actually does it mean? So I've nicked this from the Social Care Institute for Excellence, hence the logo up in the top right corner. And it says the term co-production describes working in partnership by sharing power between people who draw on care and support carers, family, and citizens. And often, what co-production to me feels like is a friendly game of badminton. It reminds me of playing with my dad as a kid, where we would try and keep the shuttlecock up between each of us, and it would be a back and forth of trying to aim it in the right position. And sometimes it would drop to the ground, but we would re-go and keep trying to do a back and forth of conversation and communication. And I feel like that is how co-production should work, with that back and forth of communication. Thank you.
Thanks, Ruth. Is this my one? It's the javelin. So we talked a lot in preparation for this workshop about co-production, what it means, but also what it isn't. And certainly in the experience of the work that we've done at NDTI, and you'll be familiar with this, it's obviously not about telling people what they want. I've worked in the past as a commissioner in children's services, and I think certainly I've been guilty of the purple one, which is consulting people or involving them and then getting on with the work without them. And I think that's something we struggle with, isn't it, in terms of the time limitations and the constraints in what you're working in, the systems you're working in, and it's a real challenge to do it properly. So I think in a minute we'll ask you a bit about some of your experience of involving young people in decisions that are important, and we'd love it to sort of hear a little bit about some of the things that have worked for you, but also the challenges. It's not about only taking the positive things. So I'm a great optimist. I have an inclination certainly to do that. So I think it's really important to really listen, obviously, and to take the things that are hard to hear. And obviously that involves not being defensive. So we hear a lot about institutional defensiveness, and we need to be really mindful that we're not sort of in any way biased towards that. And making what young people say fit into a strategy. So sort of shoehorning what people have said into something that really works well for us to tick a box and move on to the next stage of whatever it is we're being, possibly having a lot of pressure on us to deliver. And we talked about sports because the Paralympics was high in our minds, and we came up, well, Ruth helped me come up with javelin. And, in terms of actually throwing something in the air, rather a good one. Because badminton, I love your analogy there, Ruth. And I think with javelin, it's kind of you throw it in the air and then it lands and then you crack on. That's it. So that was kind of the feeling, it just sort of stays there. Might have lots of reverberations and some effect and be impressive, but it won't necessarily carry on with that two-way conversation. We were hoping that might stick in your mind as a bit of an image. So I hope that's useful. Okay, we've got a discussion now, and I'm responsible for showing you Slido, which is going to be interesting. So I'm just going to make sure I can bring that up. But what we'd like to do really is ask if you could say something about we might end up using the chat. So I'm just going to take this down and see if I can use Slido, which I have got somewhere here. Excuse me.
The technical joys.
Okay, so what I'm really hoping is that this will work, and you can go into Slido on your phone using the QR code, or indeed, actually, it'd be good if I'd put this in the chat, wouldn't it? I'm sorry, I haven't put it in the chat. Let me see if I can do that. And then please just think about an occasion when, because everyone in this room is going to be committed to working with young people and children. Think about a time where you've tried to include young people in a decision-making process, albeit individually or in a group or strategically, and share with us what worked. And in a minute, we'll also think about things that were not working so well. Great, it's working. Can you see that on the screen, Ruth? Hey, I did it. Okay, I'm really sorry about the chat though. I'm going to go back and just see if I can. No, I don't want to do that because you might lose it.
I wouldn't worry about the chat. I think people can join from the number or the QR code, Alice.
Yeah, they might put it in the chat. So would you keep an eye on that for us, Ruth?
Yes, we'll do.
Great, that's a good one, involving pupils in the annual review process. It's pertinent to the presentation, isn't it, Ruth? Do you want to read out the ones that you're seeing, Ruth, so that ICRA can hear them?
Oh, yeah, of course. So the first one was involving pupils in the annual review process, and then there is time to listen, using methods that made them feel comfortable, talking mats or scales, not only open questions, which I think is such an important one on how you ask questions. I completely agree. Developing the local young people's local offer, and our send ambassador writing the version of our send strategy, having a range of ways to give views, co-producing social care advice for EHCNA with the child/young person, and ensuring enough time is factored into the process, which I think is a really important one and come on to. We have a program called Walking in Our Shoes, which is care leavers talking about their experience and training our staff to understand how these experiences help them. It's covered by the thing if you scroll down. Experiences felt for them and how multi-agency teams can help. And co-production working with young people. Having a jargon bell for when young people are in our strategic meetings. That's brilliant. I wonder how that works. Working with young people to understand what is needed in short breaks, training provided for young people, using talking mats has helped conversations. So talking mats sounds like it's been used multiple times. Helps with young people with limited oral language. That sounds good.
Really good. And in particular, the talking mats, only specifically, I'd be really interested in hearing in the chat who put that in. Is there someone there? Because talking mats has come up twice. Do you want to come on the mic and just say a bit about that?
Hi there. I put it in once. And yeah, my name's Lucy Redden. I'm a speech and language therapist by background. So I've used visuals and scales and things like that a lot. I haven't had the official talking mats training because I think there is a very specific approach. But I was just talking more about it. The talking mats training is something that our service in Lewisham offer to lots of different professionals so that they can kind of learn more about how to use those kind of approaches. But I have used it in the way that I used it. I'm not sure if it was right. But, you know, visuals and scales and where could we put these things just to get children's views about the subjects really in school that they felt they were good at and comfortable with and things like that.
Thank you, Lucy. Really useful because at NDTI we're really challenging ourselves to do more thinking about inclusion of people who don't use their voice. We do that, but I think we could do it better. So quite useful. Thank you very much. I'm just conscious of time. I can't believe how much we're getting here. We've got exactly the right people in the room. I love all these examples. At risk of sort of moving through them a bit quickly, what I'm going to do now is just move, I hope, to the next question, if you don't mind, which is what could have been done better. And I think in this one, it's sort of not long words, but, you know, what are the things that are the challenges here? Because we all face them, and it's an important one for young people who are hosting this workshop to hear in terms of what it is they'll be covering after this. Giving enough time. Ruth, can I go over to you again to read them out? Is that all right? Sorry.
Yes, of course. Thank you. Time to revisit. I would agree with that. Not relying on the same young people over and over again. More involvement of children, young people in strategic decision making. Understanding all stakeholders are on the same page. Asking children and young people / families to participate after the start of the project. Being clearer with young people how their voice made a difference. Getting other people excited about engaging with young people.
Yeah.
I think we're good at asking initial opinions for a project, but not then very good at feeding back about what is happening / what happened.
Yeah, there's several on
Providing
feedback.
I was going to say feedback is a common one that's come up, which I'd agree with. Gaining a variety of children and young people voices. Finding how to create a wide range of communication to involve a range of young people. Diversity of voice, yeah. Planning in enough conversations, the shuttlecock game. Thank you. Yeah. Badminton.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you very, very
wonderful.
much for all of that. And I really particularly in particular when Ikra and I were just speaking before the session about this presentation and some of the work we're presenting, that thing about feedback, Ikra, is something that you were talking about, and it comes across, I think, through the training squad, so you can help pick that up there when we get to that. So thank you very much for that. I'm going to hand back over to Ruth now on sort of sharing some of your own experiences. Thanks.
Thank you. So this slide is about what's worked for me. And I'm going to talk about 4 examples, some of them good, some of them less good, and try and explain my experience about that. So I've got bullet points in the middle and one saying the evaluation team. So a key aspect of how I've seen co-production work amazingly is with the Time to Talk Next Steps team with NDTI, and how they involved me and 2 other young people, including actually Ikra on the call, in the evaluation of the project. And they took the time to help train us to learn about evaluations, because when I first started out, I had no clue what their job was. And when I thought of a evaluator, I didn't think of how it would work in that aspect. So it was a lot of learning. And when we first started out, it was a change of expectation on how the timeline would go about. And there was that kind of badminton game of back and forth where we had quite a few conversations on the expectations of young people, as we were still had reasonable adjustments needed and were unable to do certain things, or had our life impacting how we were able to access the online training. So there was a lot of back and forth, and to make sure it was as accessible as possible, but also so we could be a part of the learning and then the production of the evaluation as possible, which was so essential. And it was an amazing opportunity to learn, but also in the end ended up helping more young people with the feedback. We received more young people more willing to give feedback, whether that was to negatively criticize or to positively comment on how the service was going and make suggestions. They were more comfortable around people their own age to give that feedback, which was so wonderful to see. Which it was mainly positive, but that was so wonderful to be a part of that and to help produce a more accessible feature. And so for my next example is annual reviews. So the great joy of I've had many annual reviews, and I think the difficulty I found with annual reviews is the lack of communication and understanding for meetings. I had an expectation once where I would have to go into a library and then go through the library to get into the meeting room. However, all the teachers knew at the time that I couldn't actually enter the library due to how severe my anxiety was. So it was such a weird expectation when it was the first annual review I ever tried to attend, to be expected to go through that library into the meeting room, and took me a good 10 minutes, and I had to go covering my eyes because it was so anxiety inducing. And it put me on it felt like it put me on a back foot for the entire meeting. And then what's more, I wasn't offered a drink or tea or a coffee, whereas my parents were. So it didn't feel like I was a full participant in the room, which was essential to being able to fully share my experience. And I didn't feel comfortable in the same way that one might feel if they were part of planning before the annual review, planning maybe the room or how they'd like to be addressed, whether their parents would like to be addressed instead. And I think that's really essential to think about the just not just the meeting itself, but the planning beforehand and after. And it's such an essential skill to build up for you to be able to practice meetings if you struggle with that. And over the years, I've been able to practice planning for the annual reviews and eventually go into having more support in schools with my preparation and writing out how I felt I've done in the past year, which has taken a lot of the pressure off of my home environment, which has been wonderful. And I think that's something really essential. And then for another example, my top tips, I created a kind of a checklist for annual reviews when I first started public speaking with NDTI, and that was about my top tips about annual reviews, and it's apparently one of the most accessed resources on the website, which was funny because my mum was actually recommended it by a work colleague who didn't know it was mine. And I was helped to co-produce that because although it was all my words, I had help with writing it out and help because I like to do stuff when I write stuff out. And at the time, I wasn't able to sit still for very long, so I had help writing it out by support workers. And then the designs that were drawn onto it, which you'll see later because it comes up on another slide, were done by a colleague called John Rouse, which was wonderful to create it, make it come to life, I think. And that was co-produced in turn with everyone. And I wouldn't be able to do that by myself. And so I managed to create a resource where it was fully explaining my voice with support. And for the last example, I've had the experience of working with organizations who will be very set on the idea of young people being a voice, which I think is incredibly essential to have young people voices as a forefront, especially for work with young people. However, actually, it unfortunately, young people voices were prioritized to the point where accessibility was lost. And so they had an expectation on a certain amount of young people being a part of the project, but this didn't take account into how we had to co-produce things with different disabilities or how we needed support setting up events. And I think this is something really essential that we always try and include young people voices, however, in an accessible way and prioritizing how to make sure co-production is either at the forefront or young people's voices are at the forefront. But it doesn't, just because adults are involved, it doesn't mean that it's reduced. Thank you.
That was a really useful discussion that we had about that in terms of the structure that was so valued in order to enable a mixed group of people to really participate. And I don't think I'd properly considered that until we had that discussion with the group. So thank you for that. This is it speaks for itself, really. There are links to this as well.
This is my top tips that I was talking about in the slide before. It's the most accessed resource online, which I think is kind of insane. And there is a link at the end of the slides to be able to access this, and it talks about before the meeting and what you might want to take into consideration with a young person during the meeting. And I still think donuts is such a good option, but apparently that's not always available.
It's not always the healthiest option either, is it? I'm going to move on, Ruth, because
And then after a meeting as well.
Oh,
Yeah.
sorry, forgive me. I've
No,
moved on to
don't
this
worry.
slide now.
This is about group co-production, and so I've done a bit of group co-production with young people as part of NDTI, and it's about, I think these are the key parts of group co-production that I've found personally, that's about finding the right balance between trying to encourage young people to take a lead, when I was talking about an organization before, and get them involved, but not putting unreasonable positions of responsibility on. And often about building up those relationships between young people. It's quite difficult to suddenly go into working with strangers and taking on more responsibility, especially if this is a very new task to you. And I think it's really essential to build up those relationships and have those conversations instead of putting people together and endangering how people work together and a breakdown of relationships based on lack of communication. Talking about the freedom to express yourself within that structured environment so that you can get across your ideas and your wants, like I did with my top tips, but I had that support to create that resource, which I wouldn't have been able to without the structured environment around me. Which often sounds opposites with the freedom of expression and structure, but somehow links together. And then also planning. I've never been able to, well, do good planning for groups of young people, and I've tried a few times. It is like herding cats. Everyone has so much going on and are doing amazingly. However, it can really help to have an outside source to help pinpoint dates to do, because it can be very irritating, and having a group or an organization activity being planned separately is to find that suitable time is helps relax people and bring them into a more calm environment with no predetermined stresses, and allowing time for that informal chat and time slots organized by staff, quiet monitored build up, slowly helping people work together, breaking down steps, if not experienced, of being in settings, and managing group dynamics if there's any difficulties, because not everyone is going to get on.
We'll just do this one quite quickly, Ruth, because I want to make sure we get onto the training squad. So it's a good overview, isn't it? Do you want to speak to the image that you created for this slide?
Yeah, so I created this slide with Canva. I'm a massive fan of having fun on Canva and just randomly creating designs. And it talks about how NDTI started off with mentoring and then led on to peer support due to young people saying they wanted to meet other young people in similar situations. So it was completely led by young people. And peer support was created, which I now actually help run, which has been wonderful. And then there are now in-person meetings. There was in-person meetings, and we got to go to actually Legoland at one point, and that was so lovely because everyone after a while said they really wanted to meet in person, and I remembered being quite an active voice in that actually. And there was a lot of talk about lack of residentials and wanting to experience that, which created this opportunity to develop what the original plan was of time to talk next steps and expand it into what young people were asking for.
Yeah, and I think it's worth mentioning that due to the lottery funding, we were in a great position to really co-produce everything step by step through that programme, because it was possible to change what we'd originally planned in response to what young people requested. And that's a luxury that I know many people cannot afford to do. But it did mean that we've got some really great sort of engagement. I'm just going to hand now, thanks Ruth, to Ikra for this slide, which is the one that talks about the training squad. Are you all right there, Ikra?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hi, my name's Ikra, and I'm going to be speaking about training squad. It was co-produced and delivered, including me and some other young people. Even we had like facilitators but they took a step back and they let the young people plan the training. It took like a long time because at the start, like the first 6 months of co-producing the training, we spoke about what is for, why we want to do this training, and who is it for. We had these 3 questions, and it took up to 6 months to plan all these questions and to make it correct. And no one told us what we can do and can't do because it was co-produced by the young people, and everyone did what their super strengths were, because sometimes you might not be good at something than other things, so it will call your super strengths, as everyone had a different strengths to that training. And then when we have a plan of why we are doing it for and what is it for and who is it for, and then we came up with 4 sessions, which were values. The first session that we run for professionals. Values are as young person, professionals might not see your values or work with your values. That was the first session that run. The second session was labels. Most of the times, professionals might see you as labels, not as a young person, because everyone is unique. And even if you have a labels, but you still are a person. And sometimes professionals don't see you like that. They just see you as labels. And then third session was making your own decisions, because as with disability or with SCND needs, some most of the times persons think, and as a disabled person, you can't make your own decisions. Someone else makes them decisions on behalf of you, but that's not correct. And most of the time, even if you can speak for yourself, professionals will speak to your parent, or PA, or someone who's with you. They will not speak to you, even if you can speak for yourself. And I think, if I think as a human person, everyone has that right to make their own decisions, even if you have a disability. And that was a third session run, and we also did decision profiles that have a person make decisions, and when and how is it suitable for them. And then fourth session was about why being curious. It's important when you're working with with a young person. It's okay to think that way. It's okay to ask questions. Then as they're asking questions for you, and I think co-producing and doing this training, it was very beneficial, because as a young person, we have the rights to make all them decisions and working that way when you're working with a person. And I think all the other organizations should co-produce and deliver training with young people. And I think with NDTI, it was important to do that, and as and they let us do that, the lottery. So I think all the other organizations should let young people do that as well.
Thanks, Ikra. And excitingly, I know that's something that the young trainers want to do more of as well. So it's kind of watch this space. I think we've got a bit of time, I hope, for questions and answers. So we'll just make sure we hear if you've got any questions about any of the next steps for that work. But thank you so much, Ikra. I'm aware that this workshop finishes at 10 past, and so Ruth, with your permission, I'm going to flick to a slide and make sure that we cover this really important final slide. And then I'll make sure that I just say about the other things in the slide set that people will receive because of time. So is this my slide or your slide, Ruth?
I think it's mine, but
okay.
I'm happy to
do you mind covering it?
Yes, I'd love to. So it talks about why is co-production important and how it links to human rights. So why is co-production important? And I'll go through this quickly. Is it ensures equality and partnership. It shifts the balance of power. It produces a sense of ownership over the services and policies created, which means that they're more likely to be engaged in. It's more sustainable and reflective of real needs of people. And to talk about how it interlinks into human rights, or how I felt it did, is co-production strengthens the practice of human rights by ensuring that people are not passive recipients of services, but active in their design and implementation. It brings to life the principles of Human Rights Act. And this ensures that public services are more inclusive, just, respectful of the rights and dignity of all individuals. So, yeah.
Thank you so much, Ruth. What I'm going to do now is I'm just going to show you 3 slides that we haven't spoken to, and then give a few minutes for questions, just to make sure that you're aware of the other resources. So this lists and links all the resources that we've referred to. And the one we haven't spoken about a lot, but we wanted to make sure you were aware of, is a co-produced film by young people about our world of work. And it's not fully co-produced. They were really keen to make sure that we explained that there were some aspects of this film which you got a link to that weren't co-produced due to the timescale and the budget constraints. And Ruth also produced this really fantastic sort of process diagram, which I love, and actually it follows very nicely the work that Ikra described, I think. Because it goes from, you know, the decision, the relationship building, the roles, working about strengths, co-design. It's such a journey, isn't it? And it sounds like many of you have got experience of doing this. But we hope very much that this session has helped kind of refresh your enthusiasm for it, and just want to give a few moments for any questions that you might have for Ruth and Ikra. Thank you. Got a clapped hands there, Ikra. Two clapped hands, 3 clapped hands. Any questions?
Lots of hands clapping, and someone's put their hand up.
Okay, who's that then, Ruth? I can't see. Sorry. Louise.
Louise, I think.
Hello, thank you so much for the talk today. It's really been helpful. One of the things that we've been trying to do is really instigate our young people forum, and making sure that we have a group of young people, like we have our parent care forum, but actually really have a young people's forum. We're really struggling to get this off the ground. So we get some people, young people really want to do it, and then we just haven't got the momentum going, really. And it's just, if anybody's got any advice and guidance. And Alice, I know that your team have been doing this as well, but I'm just wondering how we can really, we've had different sessions, we've offered different sessions, and young people come to those sessions, but then actually then to say, oh, and actually we want you to be part of a forum to actually have your voice. We just don't seem to be getting that next step kind of thing. So they're coming to the talks about healthy eating, they're coming to talks about preparing for adulthood. So we're doing part of like what we do with our parent care forum. We have 2 elements of our parent care forum, one being the workshops, the activities, but obviously the other part is our strategic development, being part of our check and challenge kind of thing. But we just can't seem to move forward with that with our young people. I just wondered if anybody's got any guidance or any suggestions, really.
I've got a few thoughts. I'll share them, and then maybe Ruth and Ikra might want to chip in with theirs. I think certainly from experience, there's that we fall very easily, don't we, into language that puts people off. And I think Ruth spoke a bit about expectations and kind of actually people quite quickly feeling like uncertain about what you're really asking for, therefore feeling more likely to come along, eat the pizza, and then think, actually, I'm not sure it's for me. So there's something for me about breaking it down and almost asking young people that are working with you to make the language and the purpose really clear to other young people. And also maybe you need young people from NDTI to come and help you.
Yeah, that's what I was just thinking, actually get a group of young, it's just that really clear, like we really do want to have young people's voice. We want them to be part, exactly what, like today, it's been amazing hearing from young people directly, and that's really what we are wanting, that next stage on from us. And so we've had like annual review paperwork review, and our young peoples have helped us design and change those annual review paperworks to make them more young people friendly. So we are doing the different activities kind of thing, but actually not as a forum, and actually the steering and kind of guiding us.
Can I
kind
come
of thing.
in?
So, yeah.
I think it also might be because of time and flexibility, and
Mhm.
maybe like you might be doing it at a time that might not see your young people, and also it might not be flexible, like because sometimes like professionals will want to do something from 9 to 5, but as a young person or with a person with disability, it might not suit their time 9 to 5. So I think it might be you might want to look something after 5 to 9, like so a time after 5 maybe, and
Yep.
I think also it should be flexible.
Mhm.
Yeah, we ended up using Zoom, didn't we? Because everyone hated Teams,
Yeah.
things like that. Ruth.
I was just going to say that I think also trying to find out what the young people, do the young people know what they will get out of this, and how this will go towards like the future of services, or what this is going towards, is
Yeah, I think
what
that's
I'd,
probably what we need to focus on, is actually, so what kind of, like, by them being involved, what difference will it make, kind of things. I think that's a really good
because
call.
I've seen and I've heard from like a lot of young people I talk to, a lot of my friends, what they're feeling when they hear about advisory groups is the feeling of frustration, that when they do give feedback and they take time out of their life to give that feedback, they don't see any feedback from their responses, and they haven't heard whether it's been even acknowledged to do with a service, because obviously not everything can be taken on by a service due to like time constraints and funding. However, not even to hear that feedback that actually we've heard you and we want to take this forward. And it can also be about, accessibility and donuts, I'm just saying. But also trying to find out what the young people might want to discuss, and having
Mhm.
them join in from the beginning, instead of saying there might be this meeting for you to give feedback, because it can be quite hard to give general feedback as
I think that's
to
where we're really struggling with,
the
as I say,
overall
that
service.
yeah, so we're really struggling with, so actually the engagements, if we say, right, we want to do this activity and this is what we want to achieve, we're achieving it with our young people. We're actually getting those tasks. So we've developed a local offer for our young people. I was the person that put on that, and actually that was really good sessions with engaging in young people, getting what they wanted on the website, how they wanted it, the design, the videos. We did because there was a really clear start and finish. It's just those general kind of then having to say we've got a forum kind of thing, and to actually have a chair. Like some authorities have managed to get a chair of the forum, and actually that they then tend, like this, as you say, the strategic meetings and things like that. What will they get out of it? What do they, I mean, how uncomfortable that is coming into those meetings. So yeah, we're trying to really work on that.
Thank you. And Louise, I put my email in the
Thank
chat, so
you.
please do come back to us. Thank you all for your time. We're going to finish this session now because I think we've got another one coming up, and you might be late for your next one as well. But thank you very much. Thank you, Ruth. Thank you,
Thank
Ikra.
you.
Absolutely
Thank
amazing.
Thank you so
you.
much.
Thank you so much. Bye. Bye.
People are putting in the chat, Ikra,
Yeah.
a lot of thank yous and where we're over time, but sessions are being recorded, and